Welcome back to the channel today, Forlorn Hope. So Forlorn Hope, what is Forlorn Hope? Well, this is actually something I've wanted to do for a long time. I actually wrote to the band asking them if I could do it, but obviously, they didn't get back because busy, and I had like 10 subscribers, and now I've got whatever, not many. So obviously, I don't expect a reply, but we'll see how it goes. This is actually sort of the thing that's kicked me to do this. Is Mr. Terry History did basically this, but looking at Sabaton's 7 Pillars of Wisdom about the song they did about Lawrence of Arabia, and so I figured that's Sabaton, obviously a huge band, but Forlorn Hope is a relatively new band. Album came out this year, I think the start of this year. It's the 23rd of December, so yeah, I think it was definitely this year, early on, and it's been really good. It focuses on the Napoleonic Wars. I think almost exclusively the Peninsular War, part of the Napoleonic Wars. The Peninsular War, for those who don't know, is the stuff that happens in Spain. So we're talking, well, not exclusively, but the majority of it focuses on that. We're talking 1807, 06, 07, up until 1812, 1813, depending on what you count as in Spain. Technically, that little bit where they go into France at the end of it is still, I still say that's part of the Peninsular War, but it's not technically in Spain, it's in France. Anyway, that's a long ramble. And as you can see, I'm an intelligent man, which is why I have decided to do this metal song the day I decided to shave my head. So, we'll see how it goes. I've not done any prior research for this, so I'm just going to stick this on, and we are going to listen to War in the Shadows, which is my favourite track of them all. I just love the tagline of this, the kicker, which I'll point out. It's just great. So let's take a listen to War in the Shadows. This is, of course, about the partisans, the guerrilleros, the guerrillas, which is where the word comes from, by the way, guerrillero, little war. These guys were super effective, but we'll listen to the song and then I'll jump in and pause it and that sort of stuff. It's got a bit of an intro, so I'll feel comfortable talking. I think it's what DJs do, don't they? They call it hitting the post. But I'm not going to try and do that. I'll put a thing up here of the album cover.
Far, far from the glory and fame where banners fly and heroes die. Fight, fight for the freedom of Spain in the people's eyes. It is time to rise.
Okay, so I'm not going to analyze all the lyrics and things like that. So let's just go through it. Far, far from the glory and fame. So what happened was the Napoleon has become this super mega powerful person in Europe, and he's just gone and royally smashed the Prussians and the Austrians and the Russians to some degree. Not quite so much, but yeah, he's gone and smashed them. And he's come back, and he has gone to the Spanish and has said, "Look, these Portuguese scum are basically stealing Spanish land. How about I help you get that back?" And the Spanish just go, "Oh, that would be very nice. How can you do this for us?" Well, what I'll do is, I'll take over the garrison duties of your fort, so you can just give me all your Spanish forts. I'll garrison them all with Frenchmen, don't worry about it. And then my army will then take all of your army, which you have massed together because we've taken over the care of your forts. No need to thank us. And we'll go and deal with these filthy Portuguese. And then what happened was, the French army arrived in Spain, and Napoleon pointed out that, "Oh, look, we seem to have taken over all of your forts, and your army's all in one place, and we could crush it if we like. You know who I think would be a good king of Spain? My brother. My brother would be a phenomenal king of Spain. I think he should be king of Spain." And they basically just coup d'etat in Spain by manning all of their forts and basically lying to them about... Napoleon's a phenomenal liar, by the way. If you ever read anything claimed to... Napoleon basically just lies to your face and then openly double crosses you, and then people should have figured this out by now. Anyway, he puts his brother on the throne, and his most Catholic Majesty, Ferdinand VII, is the basically monarch in exile, almost like a World War II government in exile at this point, which is pretty common in this era. People would flee to Britain and various other places, mostly Britain, And so Ferdinand the Seventh, His Most Catholic Majesty Ferdinand the Seventh. If you've seen the Sharp, that's frequent and it's real. It was known as. So you'll hear for Ferdinand, that's the King of Spain. So essentially, what happened was the Spanish army sort of either joined the French, went home because, people don't know. There's this weird idea that people have to be soldiers. They can just go home. People can just leave. They joined the British as Spanish units. That happened a lot. Or they joined the guerrilleros. Some of them joined the French. Not many. They joined the guerrillas. And the guerrillas we'll talk about later, but those are sort of what happened. The Spanish army either broke up, went with the British, some sided with the French, or people just ran to the hills. And you might be a guerrilla on Friday and then go back to your farm, and then 6 months later you're like, oh, you know what, I'll do that guerrilla thing again. And so, extremely fluid.
Drive the invaders away. What they took from us, they will count the cost. Stand for your nation today, till the French blood flows, till they feed the crows. Fight, make them bleed. Strike without warning, attack and retreat.
Little stuff. This is the tag.
For your land, for your God and your country, for King Ferdinand.
Okay, so for your God and your country and King Ferdinand. For God, Spanish Catholics, French Catholics. You would think this would be common, but no, it's not. You see, Napoleon was an excommunicate at this point. He was, I would say, he was a heretic as well. He'd actually written some stuff that was actually just openly heretical. But he was a definite excommunicate and a schismatic because he had arrested the Pope and kidnapped him. And he'd been excommunicated for this, which is what happens when you arrest the Pope and kidnap him. Even if you then come out and say, well, I didn't tell the guy to do it, he just sort of did it on his own, and he happened to be a marshal of mine. So, that's why you're holding him prisoner, are you? Yeah. So basically Napoleon had kidnapped the Pope. But there's another reason that these Spanish Catholics were very, very, very reluctant to trust the French. And for that, we have to go back to another guerrilla army. Or another irregular army, I should say. Not really guerrillas, but irregulars. The Catholic and Royal Army of the Vendine, or the Vendian, or the Vendine. These were a peasant/tradesman/common army that were led by a lot of exiled nobility, exiled royalty. The LB is pretty famous with that, but there's heaps. I'll put a bunch of pictures and names up. I'm not going to go through them all. They're very famous. In this very niche sphere, these guys are quite famous. Catalano is probably the most famous one of them all. But these were people who were operating in the mid-1790s to early 1800s. These were the guys who were operating at the height of the French Terror. And something that doesn't often get talked about is the very anti-religious, especially anti-Catholic connotations of the French Terror. They were brutal. They changed the week from 7 days to 10. They basically decimalized everything. So you had 100 seconds in a minute, 100 minutes in an hour, and 10 hours in a day, or something like that. They decimalized the calendar. They decimalized the week, so you didn't have a Sunday anymore. They got rid of all church names on streets. They executed nuns. The Carmelite sisters or the Carmelite nuns are the most common example of this, where they just flat out executed nuns. They would harass priests and stop them celebrating mass. They were very anti. They were anti most religions too, but they specifically focused on Catholicism because it was the predominant religion. And in the Vendine or the Vendin, it was extremely prevalent, and it was very rural. It's still quite rural today. You can't really just go there. You have to sort of, drive through. It's not somewhere you can kind of catch a train or just nip down on a bike to. The Vendine is quite rural, and the nobility of the Vendine were more. They didn't really have cash to throw around, so most noblemen would simply have an estate and then live in Versailles or live in Paris. But the Vendine sort of had to. They couldn't flash that much cash, so they sort of lived at home most of the time, and they would go to Paris or Versailles once or twice a year. So what happened was, when the crackdown started, a lot of clergy went to the Vendine, and the Vendine basically rose up, and they had the Catholic and Royal Army of the Vendine, which was actually quite successful. They won a few battles. They eventually got crushed by Kléber, who we've talked about before. But the Spanish saw what happened here. Some people have called it the first modern genocide, where they killed like 150,000 people. That I'm not saying either way. But it was brutal reprisal against, in this case, Catholics. And the Spanish were even though Napoleon had technically sort of tried to move away from that, they were still very, very concerned about this sort of thing. And the French also looted churches. The French regularly killed religious people because they thought they were cooperating with the Spanish, which they were a lot of the times. But, you kidnap the Pope, you make enemies within the church. What can I say? So, that pretty much covers that. What else can I say about that? The Vendine, you mostly recognise it by this symbol here. This white with a heart and a cross. Catholic and royal, obviously. Royalists who were Catholic. There was another 2 armies that technically have the name Catholic and Royal, although one of them had a lot of Protestants, so they sort of don't use that name. One thing I like about the Vendine is you can just use generic militia figures. I don't know if that's going to show up. You can sort of use generic militia figures, because that's what it was. A lot of scythes, a lot of pitchforks. These guys actually won some battles with freaking scythes and pitchforks, man. So yes, that's. I think I might have got off on a tangent there, but yes, the French, the Spanish guerrillas, sort of were a little bit concerned with the way that they thought the French might treat them if they got dominance, and then sort of recessed back into this anti-religious behavior.
I may not live to see the end. Expect no mercy and show none unto them.
Yeah, no mercy at all. If you ended up being captured by guerrillas, you were pretty much dead. This is the age of chivalry, remember? This is sort of the last of the big black powder mega scale conflicts. No chivalry whatsoever. They would torture you and murder you. And if you were a guerrilla and you got captured by the French, you were probably going to get tortured and murdered as well. The French had contra guerrillas, and they sort of had some French guerrillas, but they're not even worth talking about. They're so small. Pro-French guerrillas. There were anti-guerrilla units. The dragoons mostly ended up doing a lot of the anti-guerrilla work. So if you're looking at war games where you want to have someone taking up against guerrillas, which I have, I have some skirmishing guerrillas to go with my British. The French dragoons, which I have here, are probably your best bet. Almost all the cavalry in the peninsula was dragoons. Except for a notable example of some Poles, which we're going to see in another song anyway. So yes, no mercy, no quarter. The guerrillas would just attack any Frenchman and just kill them. No. Of course, they wouldn't just attack every single Frenchman. They would obviously pick and choose their fights, which is what makes guerrillas so dangerous. Is that they don't always just attack you, but they wouldn't mince around with oh, would you please mind surrendering? They'd just kill you.
Strike when they think they are safe in the dead of night, till their troops take flight. Fear, keep their armies engaged till Napoleon sees his plans undone.
Keep their armies engaged till Napoleon sees his plans undone. This was the big part of the guerrillas. This is why Wellington tolerated them. This is why Wellington reinforced them. This is why he sent them weapons. They kept the French army engaged. A giant chunk of the French army, I'll actually look up the statistic and put it on screen. It's enormous. A giant amount of the French army was spent guarding supply wagons, because even if that one wagon won't be attacked, it might be attacked, so you got to guard it. Whole troops of whole squadrons of dragoons were assigned just to guard supplies. They were just harassing constantly. Guerrillas aren't going to, even 3,000 guerrillas aren't going to take on a battalion of French infantry or a squadron of dragoons. They don't attack formed up units like that. They hit your supplies. They burn down crops in front of you. The French live off the land, so they'll strip the land and scorched earth it, or they'll just move everything out. The guerrillas can just disappear into a town. You walk past, they come and attack you again. They attack your foraging parties. The guerrillas were constantly engaging the French. This meant that the French didn't have any time to sort of sit back. The British and Portuguese, the British-Portuguese army with Spanish assistance could just sit there. They could sit back and just comfortably resupply and restock, but the French couldn't. The French had to constantly keep fighting these guerrillas all the time. And the more they got pushed back, not the worse it got, because these guerrilla groups tended to be regional. So after you got pushed out of one particular region, that you were pretty much safe from those guerrillas now. So as they get pushed back, it doesn't get worse. Like, it's not like there's a wave of irregular guerrillas just flooding through Spain. It generally, the more the French retreated, the less of an impact the guerrillas had. Although it still continued right up until the Pyrenees. Some of the most brutal were actually up in the north, in Catalonia. Catalonia? Yeah, I think so. I love the song. The band's great. British, I think. The album's called Over the Hills, by the way. If you're looking for it, you can find it on YouTube and Spotify. It's fantastic. I think listen to it on Spotify, because Spotify, they actually give the artists a bit of a cut, much more than YouTube do. And these guys are really, really good. They've got a Facebook page, which is awesome. But yeah, Forlorn Hope, a great band. Sergeant Patrick Masterson is actually on the album cover, and we'll get to him because there's a song about him. He's phenomenal. Spanish units sucked donkey balls, burro balls. I think the Spanish units were awful. The cavalry was okay, but Spanish infantry was yuck. There's like one battle where the Spanish cavalry actually do a good job, and it's a huge deal. It's a massive deal. There's actually, it's a bit off topic, but Colonel Cuthbert Collingwood wrote in his memoirs that he gave a giant amount of black powder to the Spanish Navy, like this huge amount of powder, like this will keep you guys in stock for months, and they fired it all that night in a celebration. And he was phenomenally pissed that the Spanish weren't the best allies. Good guerrillas though, but the British generals did not think highly of Spanish regular troops. Wearing enemy uniforms was another thing they did. They did no rules, guys. No rules for the guerrillas. I'm not going to talk about. No, I'm not going to talk about that. Okay. So there you go. There is War in the Shadows. The thing wasn't. This was more of just sort of an overview of the French guerrillas. We weren't really going to go into the in depth of like this is what this lyric means and here's this funny thing. We might do that in some other videos, but this was more just about here's a cool song, introduce you to the band, introduce you to the concept. It's not my concept, I didn't invent this obviously, but definitely check out Mr. Terry History and his video on Lawrence of Arabia. That review he did, or that sort of reaction video, I think he called it. But no, it's great, and I'm not going to talk about the Carlist Wars and how some of these French guerrillas end up becoming like leaders of armies and things like that. But I'll leave it there. Thanks very much for watching. If you enjoyed this type of video, let me know down below, and I am going to go back and do other content as well. I'm just trying to catch up right now. So thanks very much for watching. Have a wonderful day.